All right, welcome to the fifth NYSAWLA 2021 webinar in our webinar series. I'd like to thank you all for joining us. I'd like to take a moment to present to you today's presenter, Miss Diana Garone, who's teaching at the North Shore Schools. I've known Diana for a long time. I had the great fortune of having Diana work with me here in Northport for several years, and then I lost her to Nassau County, and it's very sad for me, but very happy for North Shore. And I know that the workshop she's going to present to you today is going to be really outstanding because she's got some really tremendous, amazing ideas, and she's wonderful in the classroom. So I'm going to hand this over to um, Mrs. Garone.
Hi, everybody. My name is Diana Garone. I teach Italian at North Shore High School. And today I'm going to be talking about creating IPAs for authentic assessment in an online setting, because that's kind of where we're all at right now. A lot of what I'm going to show you today is more geared towards, it can kind of be used as like a classroom activity, kind of like an integrated performance classroom activity, but can also be used for assessment. So I'll show you kind of how I use it as like a classroom activity as well as for assessment. The reason that I'm using like an integrated performance model very frequently, and everything that I show you is stuff that I've used in the past 3 months or so. The reason that I'm teaching in this way is because with this model, we're in hybrid. I don't know what I'm sure that there's a variety of different models that everybody else is working with, but in our hybrid model, I only get to see my students for 40 minutes twice a week. So I need to make sure that when they're in front of me, I'm engaging them in the modes of communication every single day that I have a student in front of me, because that's going to be where they're really going to grow in their proficiency. So I've kind of found like a model that really works for me that I'm excited to share with you. And then I'll show you how I could turn any one of these classroom activities into an assessment should I ever, want to do that. Okay. So just to give you an overview about what I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to talk about sources, because every single one of these ideas for all of these lessons starts with a source. And we kind of all have like in our back pocket, like, oh my gosh, I saw this great article on Facebook. I can't wait to like use it for a lesson. Or, oh, I have this great YouTube video, or I saw this great post on Instagram. I can't wait to use it. And then we kind of like don't do anything major with them, or like we struggle to figure out, okay, how am I going to really integrate this source into, something that's going to really engage my students in all three modes of communication, either in the classroom as part of classroom activity or in an assessment. So we're going to talk a little bit about sources and can-do statements, because again, like, what do we want our students to be able to do with those sources? Once we have them, okay, great. What can you do with it? So really just looking at how we're going to create those can-do statements from that, from that source. I'm going to show you some examples of activities that I've done. Like I said, everything I'm going to show you today is a classroom activity. It's an integrated performance classroom activity. But I'm going to talk about also how we could turn those into assessments if we wanted to use them for, assessment purposes as opposed for just, a 40-minute class period. And then hopefully at the end, we'll have time to kind of create our own and make our own. So like I said, all of these kind of are born from this one source that we have. So maybe if you want to think about, an article that you saw that you really wanted, that you really would love to create something really, really valuable with, or, if you have an assessment coming up at the end of a unit, start to think about sources as I'm talking to, see, okay, great, this is something that I have, or that, I really am looking to manipulate into making some sort of integrated performance or proficiency based either activity or assessment. Okay. So when it comes to sources, I teach Italian. I know a lot of you guys were saying you also teach Italian. We're like a little bit limited in the amount of sources that we have available to us. I know when I teach Spanish and I would, look for, a source, and I'm like, okay, I need to find something that describes a cooking class, but it can't be too complex because it's for level 2. And I'm able to find it. But for Italian, sometimes it's a little bit more difficult for me to actually locate those sources. If they're authentic, that's awesome. But I found great things on like Audiolingua, and I know that it's made by native speakers for non-native speakers if you're pulling something off Audiolingua. But why couldn't you have heard that, you know, from a vlogger on a YouTube channel? Like I just listened to one the other day of a girl talking about what she's been doing in during coronavirus in her apartment in Milan in lockdown. Why couldn't she have heard that on a vlog on a YouTube channel? You know, so even though sometimes some of these places like Audiolingua, they weren't originally designated to be used for authentic sources, I'm able to manipulate them in a way that I can feel good about, you know, using a source that has real authentic language being used in a real way and using it for that sort of, like I said, activity or assessment. Throwing it back to the early 2000s, Yahoo Answers is actually really, really useful for me. And I'll show you in one of my examples, I used like a question somebody asked on Yahoo Answers, but people go on there and ask like, oh, you know, I'm traveling with my family for Settimana Bianca and we're going to go up to Trento and I need to know, you know, where to go. And it's perfect. It's perfectly usable for something like this. So I'll show you one that I found that I pulled. It was for clothing and, you know, how I was able to manipulate that for a classroom activity as well. YouTube sketches and shorts are always good. You know, we're all using those or finding commercials on YouTube. And even I don't use a textbook, but sometimes thumbing through a textbook, you'll find a great article or you'll find a great like short story or you'll find a great song that can absolutely be used for any one of these activities. So even if you're not exclusively using a textbook, sometimes they have great resources, especially if you're, you know, like with my situation in Italian, where sometimes I kind of struggle to actually locate these sources. Okay. So integrating can-do statements it's probably the most important part of creating these integrated performance activities or assessments because they create a focus for you and for the students. You're able to really kind of keep accountability even for yourself. Like, okay, is this really, am I testing my students in the modes of communication? Straying away from like assessing their abilities and the skills individually, like when it comes to the speaking or writing, you're not testing the skills in isolation. You're making sure that they're able to use all of those modes of communication together and really demonstrate their proficiency. Exactly, it's what the students can do with the source. And also you can use it kind of at the end, like how well were you able to complete that task? You know, were you able to infer meaning from this? Were you able to have this debate? How well were you able to do that? So it's also good for like a reflection piece then at the end for the students so that they're accountable for their own learning. Okay, when I create these can-do statements, I find myself gravitating towards certain words. So I thought it would be kind of fun to kind of like separate into the interpretive mode, the interpersonal mode, and presentational mode, and kind of show you like buzzwords that I find myself gravitating towards when I'm actually creating these can-do statements. Like I find myself using when I'm creating can-do statements for the interpretive mode, I find myself using words like identify, understand, or infer meaning. And you'll see them too when I show them to you, like when I show you examples of some of them that I've made. Or like when I'm in interpersonal, I'm using words like maintain spontaneous conversation, debate, or request and provide information, or negotiate. These are interview. These are words that I'm consistently using when I'm creating these can-do statements for the interpersonal mode. And again, when I'm in presentational, and these are just kind of like buzzwords that I find myself using over and over and over again. So I just thought it would be interesting to share too. I'm finding myself saying, okay, I can express thoughts. I can keep a journal. I can synthesize information in written format. I find these are just kind of words that I find myself using. So what it looks like is, And this is going to be my first exam. Oh, does anyone have any questions for me? I'm just going to turn
Not
on.
yet, Diana. Nobody's had anything in the chat
All
yet.
right, I'm just going to turn on my lights that are on automatic turn off. Okay, sorry. Okay, so this is my first example, and you'll see that I have listed, this was for a school lesson in level 2. And you'll see that I have listed here my interpretive mode, my interpersonal mode, and my presentational mode. I came up with a can-do statement for each. And I did this after I found my source. So let me actually just show you what this activity looks like, what that source was that drove what I wanted my students to be able to do with that source. So this was an article about different types of high schools. It was geared towards students that were leaving middle school, 8th grade students that have to choose a specialized high school in Italy because Italy has a specialized high school program. So I found this article, and it talked about, you know, which one should you choose, basically. And it talked about 6 different types. I have a classical high school, scientific high school, linguistic, artistic, musical, and humanities high schools. Okay, so I found this one and I'm like, you know what? I definitely want to use this because it's age appropriate. My students are in 9th grade. So it really worked. It was an authentic source, and it talked about which high school. And I'm like, wouldn't it be cool if I had my students then pick which high school was appropriate for them? So what I decided to do was I came up with this interpretive can-do statement. I can infer meaning from text describing different types of high schools that exist in Italy, because above all, I need to make sure that they're able to pull information out of that article to be able to do anything with it. Then I wanted them talking to each other, and after having read that article, gather information from each other about their academic interests so that they could eventually make a recommendation for an appropriate high school for their friend, which they would put into written format as a letter. So the way, and again, I use this as a classroom activity for a 40-minute lesson. What I did was I ended up jigsawing this out. So I think we did Liceo Classico. We like analyzed this piece together, and I had them fill in this chart. Okay. So what subjects do the students study? What are future professions for a student that graduates this type of high school? And what's a student like who attends this high school? I was working with adjectives too. So I did that. I did the classical one with them, and then I jigsawed out the rest of them. And so every student kind of became their expert of their own high school. And we filled out this chart together. So then I'm able to gauge, okay, great, this is the interpretive mode. They're able to pull information out of this. I could have done this differently. I could have done this as multiple choice questions if I wanted to make this an assessment. You know, I could have had them do free response questions in this exact format and graded that as well. It's kind of really up to you how you would want to do it. When I'm done going through this lesson, I'll show you exactly how I would have turned this into an assessment. My second piece was for that interpersonal was, okay, great. You're the guidance counselor at this school now. Let's role play it out. Guidance counselor and student. Can you gauge what your friend's academic or what your student's academic interests are in order to make an appropriate recommendation for them for a high school? Okay. So this is that whole interpersonal piece, and they had a 2-minute conversation, role playing, guidance counselor and student going back and forth, and then they switched and did it the other way. Finally, for that, so that's their whole interpersonal mode. For their presentational mode, they wrote. Now they're done. They interviewed their friend. Now you're going to write a letter, okay, and go back and take some information that you gathered from your interview and some information that you gathered from the article, and make an appropriate recommendation for a high school for that student that you interviewed. So at the end of the day, I had them engaged in their interpretive mode with the article, their interpersonal mode with that interview piece, as well as the presentational mode where they synthesized information that they grabbed from the article, as well as from their interview, in order to make an appropriate recommendation for their student. Okay, so that's how I used it as a 40-minute classroom activity. The way I would have done it if I was creating an assessment is I want to make sure that I'm giving equal weight to each mode, the interpretive mode, the interpersonal mode, and the presentational mode. So in a 100-point assessment, I like to do like 33 points, 33 points, 33 points, and create my rubrics that way. It works out really well for interpretive because I end up doing typically like 11 multiple choice questions valued at 3 points each to get my 33 points. I'll come up with, I'll use actual rubric for my interpersonal and just make it, I'll make a conversion chart that will get me to my 33 points in my interpersonal as well as my presentational. And that's how I come up with a 100-point, integrated performance assessment. Okay. This would probably take 2 days as an IPA. This interpretive piece will take an entire class period probably of having them go through that, especially if instead of doing multiple choice questions, you're doing like short response. That might take a little longer. This interpersonal, I would save in this setting right now. I would save this for a remote day when you could put students in breakout rooms of 2 in Google Meet. And what I would do is I would probably post like an assignment in Google Classroom for this. And I would say, okay, great. On your phone in your breakout room, record your conversation and then attach it to the assignment in Google Classroom so that this way I could go back and listen to them after. That would be how I would design it that way. And then presentational, that's a Google Doc that they could just, plop into the assignment in Google Classroom. So it's very, very easy to kind of manipulate these pieces to make it work in the hybrid setting or a remote setting for an assessment as well. Any questions for me?
Not yet in the chat.
Perfect. All right. Okay, so this was a fun one too. This was my theme is contemporary life, and I was doing the working world, and this was for level 5 conversation. What I did was, and this was not an authentic source. I actually got it from a website. I know there's a lot of Italian teachers here. A website called Online Italian Club, which has a lot of great listenings on there that you can kind of play with and manipulate into making work for these types of activities and assessments. If you just kind of go and, play around in there. This job advertisement sounded like a radio advertisement. So it worked really well. These are questions that were generated by online, that I found on Online Italian Club, but I could have come up with my own, especially if I was assessing the interpretive mode. I would probably come up with my own questions for this. Okay. Then, I'm sorry, let me go back to my can-do statements. So this is what I wanted them to do. I wanted them to infer meaning from the job advertisement. So that's what I was doing with those multiple choice questions. Then they're going to participate in a conversation where they request more information about that job opportunity that they heard. So now after having listened to that job advertisement, now, call the hotel and ask for more information. That's their interpretive piece. And then presentational, and I had them presenting the pros and cons of working in this environment in written format, where they would have to pull information that they got from this interpersonal piece, that phone call that they made to the hotel, as well as from the original job advertisement that they had already heard. So this is what it looked like. I had them listen, do their multiple choice. Oops. Then I gave them these situations. I had them call the hotel, got to ask 2 questions regarding the job. The other person has to respond. And this was a 2-minute conversation, and they role played it out and switched. And then I just had them do some fun stuff too, which they loved. I had them do, okay, great. So like, there's crazy employees at this hotel. I told them, like, they're crazy. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. What are these out of control employees going to do? Have a conversation about it for 2 minutes. And then I had them talk about, okay, what are 2 things that can go horribly wrong your first day of work here? And they were just having so much fun with it. And I think that it was just really, really fun. They were talking about the guests bringing their animals and their animals being out of control, running through the hotel. And it was just a really, really fun moment where they could be spontaneous and actually funny in the language. Then when they were all done, this is that presentational piece where they're talking about the pros and cons of working in this type of environment, where I'm like, okay, great, you got the job. Now let's make a list of pros and cons of working in a hotel like this based on, the advertisement you listened to and based on the conversation, that you had with the employee on the phone. All right. And then this way I'm really assessing, were you able to pull information out? Were you able to participate in this conversation? And were you able to present what you learned in written format? It's all three modes. And I did this in a 40-minute class period, but again, I could have made an assessment out of this as well. And I do find that the more I shift towards this model, this proficiency-based model in my day-to-day instruction, the more prepared my students are to sit down for an assessment like that, because it's what they're used to every single day, Okay, this is another one that I did. This was for childhood, and I did it in level 3. This one I actually just did last week, because I don't know how many of you know that Kobe Bryant is fluent in it, or was fluent in Italian. So I found a video of him talking about his childhood and what his life used to be like when he lived in Italy as a kid. So what I did was, from that source, I came up with, my can-dos. I can infer meaning from someone describing their childhood. And then I told them that they could, okay, great, you have an opportunity now to be part of this interview and ask more questions. What do you wish the presenter would have said, or the interviewer would have said? Ask those questions. And I had them role play out a continuation of that interview with Kobe Bryant, with one another. And then I had them write a diary entry at the end, like, oh my gosh, what an amazing day. You got to go and interview Kobe Bryant. Write down what you learned about your friend's experiences as a child growing up in Italy. So what that looks like, and I'll just show you quick. Oh, I also had them do this. So this is very IB. I don't know if any of you guys work in IB schools, but just having students talk about, okay, here's a photo. What do you see what do you see? And what's your personal connection to what's going on here? And I kind of try to do this as much as I possibly can, as low of a level as I possibly can, even in, with 9th grade and 10th grade, because again, it's about that comfort of just getting used to, what do you see? Can you connect to this in some way? Because we're trying to get them, eventually to that level, for IB. Am I going too quickly? Is everyone okay?
You're good. Thumbs up.
All right. Okay, good. So then we listen to our interview. I have my comprehension questions. This is all interpretive. Can you pull information out of what you listen to? Okay, good. And then again, my interpersonal, let's continue this conversation. Let's continue this interview. And finally, write your diary entry. Okay, so again, it's all 3 of those modes of communication in one 40-minute period. Okay. I think I have one more for you. Oh, this one was great too. So this source, again, from my Italian teachers, if you know Losher, have you guys looked into Losher? Yeah, okay. So Losher's got a lot of great videos, and they're even on YouTube, so you don't have to go through like their Losher website to find them. They're great. I found a Losher video of a woman going to a job agency and inquiring about, about work. So from that video, it's the same exact format every time. It's the same format. I have my comprehension questions, so I can see what information was able to be inferred from whatever input I gave them, whether it be, an article as it was in the original, or an interview, or, a listening, a commercial, whatever it was. Can you infer meaning from that? Coming up with your interview questions. Now you're going to interview this candidate for a job. And I said, oh my goodness, you are this, now role play, you are this woman. the job office is calling you, you're gonna start a job as a babysitter, write a diary entry about what you anticipate doing at work in the next coming days. Cause I think I was teaching future as well, so that they can incorporate, everything that they learned from this interview and everything that they learned in from the video into their writing. Okay, so that's my last example. Now, anyone have any questions for me? Are we good?
Nope. I promise, Diana, I'll tell you.
Thanks. Okay, so I found this that I thought was kind of interesting. This is throwing it back to what I said was my Yahoo answers. So I thought that it would be kind of fun if we looked at something together and kind of came up with, okay, great. If I wanted to use this as my authentic source, what would I do? Like, what would I have my students do with something like this? So this woman's asking about opinions from other people. She's like, listen, this is what I buy my child for, for a season. What do you guys think? Am I buying too many things? Am I doing the right, am I exaggerating? Am I buying too much stuff? Am I not buying nothing? How much do you normally purchase for your kids? And she's asking people for advice. So based on something like this, where she's giving a whole list of, this is everything that I buy. This is when I buy it. These are the sales that, I buy from these stores, asking the questions. I thought it would be kind of interesting if we thought about what could be possible can-do statements for each of the modes of communication. Like, what would we want our students to be able to do with this if we were going to present it? What would we want them to do with this in the interpretive mode? What would we want them to do with this in the interpersonal mode? What would we want them to do with this in the presentational mode? I don't know how we want to do this. I kind of have already thought about it. Does anyone have ideas of what they would do?
Feel free to unmute your mics.
Yeah.
Don't all jump up at once, like teaching from behind an icon.
I wanna say something. First of all, thank you because you are very generous. You are showing us a lot of resources. The Italian teacher, we are appreciating also the.
Of course.
Which level you want us to think about some can-do statements?
Let's do level 3. Like 10th grade, level 3. We're like in an intermediate mid. Okay, well, this is what I was thinking too. I can read a post about buying clothes on social media and infer meaning from it. That's easy for my interpretive. Okay, and I would come up with comprehension questions to make sure that students have internalized some sort of meaning from this post. I'm so sorry, I'm just gonna turn on my lights one more time. Okay. Then I thought for interpersonal, I don't know how many of you are familiar with, on the AP, there's a section that's an interpersonal writing. And it's a formal email, which a formal email wouldn't be appropriate as a text type to respond to a social media post. But even so, just engaging in written form in the interpersonal mode, where you have to, she asks you questions at the end. Clearly, we can see that she's asking some questions, and we can direct our students to ask some questions as well. So I was thinking maybe something for interpersonal mode, I might take it in that direction, because again, it's about that exposure it's interpersonal, doesn't always have to be verbal. It could be text message. It could be responding to posts on social media. And ultimately, that's how they're tested in AP. So why not? Some diversity there. So I wrote, I can engage in a social media exchange where I provide and request information regarding clothing. And again, I'm going back, like I said, I find myself gravitating back towards these buzzwords all the time. You know, she asked some questions, I'm gonna provide information, and I'm also gonna request some information. I'm always going back to these same verbs, like all the time. Okay. And then I thought maybe I didn't come up with one for presentational yet, but maybe, I don't know, put together a shopping list that could, or I would like my students at this point to show some sort of like intercultural competency, because, you know, shopping culture is so different, you know, in every single country, especially when it comes to clothes. Like in Italy, they have the 2 soldi periods where that's where people do a huge portion of their shopping. It would be very cool to like gauge their intercultural competency as well. And so I don't know what it looks like yet, but just interesting. Okay. We have some time now. What I think would be really, really cool is if, like I said before, I know we all kind of have like these sources where like, you know, we found something, we found like an article, or we found a video, or we found an interview, we found a song that we really, really want to use. But we don't know what our students, you know, what we want our students to be able to do with it. You know, you can even pick a source that it fits into what you want to teach tomorrow, and do it to, you know, something for tomorrow, or something for an assessment for later on in your unit, whatever unit you're in. If you want to grab a source and start thinking about, okay, what do I want my students to be able to do with it in those 3 modes of communication, whether it be for an assessment or for a classroom activity, and kind of start to put them together. If you look at any of the examples that I gave you, this is not very labor intensive for you as a teacher. You're getting like maximum productivity out of your students without you having to do all the work, because they're doing all the work, which is what you want them to be doing. You know, so if you know, after you identify what you want your students to be able to do with it, you can put something together, you know, be it a lesson or an assessment. But I wanted to give some time, especially while we're all kind of here to bounce ideas off of each other, to kind of work through that, you know? And I love to talk about this stuff. I'm such a nerd when it comes to planning and thinking of, you know, out of the box activities. I love to talk.
I can totally attest to that.
So, you know, I'm here, and I think it would be fun to kind of work together and see what we can come up with, and everyone can leave with something that they could definitely use, you know, in a very productive way in the coming days or weeks. So if we want to take some time and hang out and regroup in 10 minutes, I think that would be kind of cool. I'm going to be hanging out here. If anybody has any questions for me, I'd also like to send, and I'll just send the link to this presentation in our group, in our chat right now, in case anybody wants it. Okay, so I'm gonna figure out how to do that.
Can I just get a show of hands, either using your reaction buttons or hands? How many of you have experience using IPAs in your classroom? Okay, we've got a couple, not as many as I had hoped. Oh, good. Some of them are coming up. That's awesome. The IPAs are really, you know, we've talked for many, many years about being a communicative department and working, you know, having the kids communicate, and then we turn around and assess them. You know, did you put the right letter on the end? You know, did you spell that word correctly? And, you know, we're taking off a point for every accent mark that they put the old way. I know some of that is just me still reeling from, you know, my high school French teacher who took a point off for every accent that French teachers, you know this, when they write the accent just flat because they can't remember if it's aigu or grave. So, but the real goal of what we do, because if you ask any language teacher I've ever spoken to, not one of them says they became a language teacher to teach the imperfect subjunctive. Well, maybe one. Diana knows her too. Maybe one. But most people say because they want to teach about culture and they want kids to love the language and they want them to speak the language. So then one of the things I love about this, and one of the reasons I asked Diana to do this workshop, is to help us start to think about ways that we can assess kids in a way that's getting them to communicate. You know, and a lot of what we do, you know, a lot of the presentations we've had, you see that starting to come up more and more. So especially for those of you who are in your student teaching time or in your beginning parts of your career, stay on that train. So I'm going to stop talking now for a minute because I know some people need to work in quiet and I'm not good at that. Sorry.
No, that's all so true. That's all so true. And I think it's one thing, like you can be a very, very good, and I just recently said this in a conversation with my director, that you can be a very, very good, or no, with my principal, a good like activity designer. But at the end of the day, when the student gets off of the train and they need to go buy a ticket, can they do it? You know, instead of just teaching those skills in isolation, we need to do something like exactly like you said, something with a communicative goal. What can you actually do with the language? And, you know, how are we assessing that?
You know, think about when you know, for those of us that whatever your first language was, whenever you learned a second language, you know, for some of us, English was our first language. For some of us, French was our first language. You know, I grew up in Canada. French was my first language. You know, when we learned the next language, or even when you learned your first language, we didn't learn by memorizing a conjugation chart. And I'm not saying that that's not important, because it absolutely is, especially when you're at the levels of AP and IB. You know, attention to the grammar and the detail is still important. But providing students with things that they can connect with and use communicatively is huge. And like I said at the beginning of this workshop, I had the pleasure of working with Diana for several years, and every time you would walk into her classroom, she was finding ways to get the kids to want to talk. And one of the biggest things she ever did about that, I'm going to tell the tale out of school, Diana, she very rarely corrected them while they were in the middle of the conversation. You know, if she noticed that they were making errors when they were speaking, she saved it for later and found another way to wing it in. Because, and think about it, which was great because the kids felt comfortable and free to talk all the time. If someone is constantly interrupting you saying, oh, you pronounced that wrong, or oh, you use the indefinite article instead of the definite article, it's not going to make you really want to speak. So that's something that Diana probably wouldn't tell you herself. But when she does these performance assessments with kids, she allows them that freedom to communicate their idea, and then she focuses on, you know, fixing some of the issues later, which I think is really important to remember.
It's meaning, not form. That's the biggest thing. If you can understand, if they can understand and be understood, then that's really what the goal is, you know? I'm not perfect. My Italian's not perfect, you know?
Diana, have you done the Leonardo da Vinci yet? You're still muted.
I have not. I'm saving.
I noticed Christine put in the chat about some of her ideas are very creative. Yes, they are.
Oh, well, thank you.
You want to tell them about the Leonardo da Vinci while they're working?
Okay. I think that started out as when I was teaching FLES,
Yes.
foreign language in elementary. I had the students do, I showed them the Vatican and the Sistine Chapel. And then I had them get on their backs under their desks with a piece of like printing paper. I taped it on the bottom of their desk and they all did their little Michelangelo, you know, paintings from or drawings from underneath their desk, and they loved it. They loved it, and I hope they remember it forever. But anything like that you could do that's a little, a little creative, I think they appreciate it.
I was gonna say, I think William Bell was putting something in the chat about a Spanish project that was similar. Hang on, I'm just pulling it up. Yes, interpretive with Mark Anthony's Vivir mi vida. Yes, I understand that. So, finding the things that the kids can relate to in these IPAs and making it about a situation that they could possibly get hold of, I think is a great idea. Is anyone ready to share their idea? A cultural appreciation elective. What a great elective, Marissa. Marissa Vola just put in the chat, what a great idea. I'll be teaching a high school cultural appreciation elective next year and would love to use that. What district do you work in, Marissa?
I'm in the East Meadow district, so I'm going to be teaching it at Clark High School next year, which I'm very excited about. I found out 2 days ago.
Oh my God, what a cool, I'm going to have to reach out to you offline for this because that just sounds like a really cool idea.
I know, it's my first time, but it's not new to the district. East Meadow High School has a phenomenal program running, and I'm hoping to bring it to Clark High School and do it that way also. So I'm excited about it. It's pretty cool.
That's great. Diana, would you say that finding the appropriate authentic documents is the hardest part?
I think so, but I think cataloging is probably like, nobody talks about cataloging. I think cataloging is like the most important thing that you could do as a language teacher. Like in my Google Drive, and I only just started doing this maybe a year and a half ago, I have folders for like different themes. And when I come across something, I have to put it in. I have to put it in the folder immediately. Like I'll take a screenshot of like, oh my gosh, I need to use this, Instagram caption for,
Right.
for this activity.
I think
to do it right then and there, and you have to catalog it when you see it, because you're going to see it on a Friday night when you're out to dinner and you're just scrolling, and then you're going to like never find it again. So I think one of the best things that you could do for yourself is to make like in your Google Drive, just have a folder that says resources or, whatever you want it to say, and then have, shopping, food, travel. And as you come across them, populate it, because we see so many things, especially with how much we scroll, that then we never, you'll never remember. So I think that that's like the most important thing you can do. And even then you can see like, oh, I'm really slacking in my authentic resources for health. So then when you go to Italy and you're in the vet's office and you see you know what I mean? You're like, oh my gosh, I need that. And you can take a picture of it. There's,
our phone is the new, for those of us who are a little older, I won't say how much older, I used to come home, I used to bring a bag when I traveled to Europe. I used to bring a bag specifically so that I could take the menu with me and take the sign with me and take, and I used to have all of the, we used to come home with the bag of all of the authentic documents, the train ticket, the museum ticket and everything. Yes. Now it's all, now we walk around with these and you can find them there. And I think especially with the new standards that will be coming, which are theme based, so for those of you, particularly if you work in an IB school, themes is kind of the way we've done it because IB works off themes. So the fact that the state is moving to the themes, it's not so different than the topics than we had, but it's helping us. You can coordinate your folders by the themes, which I think is a brilliant idea.
Definitely important. And organization.
Yeah. And it's true, you know, for those of us who've participated in writing the exams or making your own units, there are some units that you have tons and tons and tons of material on, and some units that you have like one thing that you found 5 years ago. So, you know, I think Diana's cataloging idea is a great one because it helps you see, oh, I need more here. Oh, I could take a pause here. Although we're language teachers, we never really take a pause, do we? We just keep finding more.
Is anybody working on anything that they want to like bounce an idea off of or talk about, or nothing yet?
Go ahead, Ian, feel free. There you go.
Yeah. So I'm a first year teacher, and I'm teaching 8th and 11th grade. Right now, my 11th graders are on like art history and exploring that. So I feel like there's all sorts of obviously very authentic ways to assess students in that environment. So I was thinking even something where whether it is you know, a little article on, or either it's an article on you know, some movement or some piece, or even like someone's comments on a piece, and then talking with a partner and saying like, do you agree? Do you disagree? Why? What details do you see? And then kind of replying in a comment or giving their own like feedback to that original author after having discussed with a partner or a friend. I feel like that could be a really cool way to kind of take something. I don't know if it would be authentic or if it exists authentic. You can go turn your lights on. That's totally fine. Sitting in the dark is not fun. But yeah, I think that would be a really cool way for them to see it. And I am certain that there are plenty of opinions out on the internet that are accessible, especially for Spanish. So
Yeah. I think that the most authentic interpersonal like communication that there is right now is commenting back and forth on social media. That's what people are doing. You know, so I think that that's super innovative. I think that's an awesome idea. And you can even do that like just because I'm always thinking about, okay, how are we doing that remote? How are we doing that hybrid? Like you can do that as a question, the question feature in Google Classroom, and you can have the kids comment and respond to each other.
that's true, absolutely.
So I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
Anyone else have something they want to share? Sometimes, you know, hearing those ideas just helps you spark something in your own head sometimes too. All right, we are getting close to the end of the hour. Diana, do you have any final words for us?
No, please reach out to me if my email's up here. Please reach out to me if you need anything. I love to collaborate with other Italian teachers, especially, but of course, anybody, if you have anything, I love to work on this stuff. And, you know, I'm always learning too. So yeah, let me know.
As we have with the others, we'll be putting the video and the PowerPoint up on our website. I may not get to it tonight, but as soon as possible, we'll be getting them up. So the first 3 are already loaded and ready to go, and we're just in the process of loading the 4th one, and then we'll be doing this one as well. Does anyone have any other questions or comments before we leave tonight?
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, your lesson plans, Diana, they were like great. Little as a new teacher, you know, I'm trying to build those around all these themes that we're trying to schedule for all entire year. I think the most important and difficult as well for us to go over some lesson plans and build new lesson plans is stay around authentic resources. I
Yeah.
think it's very difficult. Sometimes I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna be super honest. I have the habit just to create my own authentic resources. I'm a native Italian
We
speaker.
called that fakealia for many years.
No. So I go, it's like, okay, let me write a passage. Like, let me write something. Let me write. And I think it's just like faster in one point. But I'm doing my best to go and, I find as many as I can. And
It takes time and for a long time, your fake alia is going to get you through. And then, and then over the summer, you're going to be like, you know what? I really want to work on my free time unit. And you're going to go and you're going to find some things. It takes time.
I feel that you have to build little by little your full
repertoire.
yeah,
Catalog, exactly.
That's it. But your lessons, that were great. And
Thank you.
after you said, I'm sure you do some of those like in 2 days maybe.
Yeah, sometimes it's 2 days.
Because
Yeah, it really depends on the great thing about these, and like you can take the same exact authentic resource and create tasks that are appropriate for an 8th grade class, like a novice high,
right.
as well as for an intermediate. It depends on the task that you want to create.
Right.
You can create multiple tasks for one piece. Nobody says that you only need to do one presentational aspect to that activity. You could do multiple. Or kind of like what Ian was saying before about like having the students comment back and forth to each other at a certain point. Like
Right.
that you can stretch it, if you want to really go deeper and deeper and deeper into the same authentic resource, you could do that. Totally.
Yeah.
And I think it's important what Diana said, that you could use the same resource in 8th grade, in 9th grade, and 10th grade. I got some wise advice from a colleague of mine in another district once, because I was making a ton of fakealia as well, in French, because I was like, oh, but they don't know all the words on the thing. And they reminded me that when they go to France, they're not going to know all the words. They need to be able to use the skill to figure it out. So not everything on that. And you're a new teacher, and I understand, because I did all the same things. We've all been there. I see some other heads shaking of those of us who've been doing this for a few years. We've all done that. And that's not a bad thing, because any exposure they're getting is great. And but don't be afraid to try the other ones as well, because the kids are going to surprise you. It's more about the type of task. Diana was right. It's about the type of task you're creating around the authentic document.
Right. Yeah.
And I add quickly something.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Okay. And I want to, as a Queen's College, we also, Dr. Addy also creates a few years ago the New York Star Path, which is the integrated IP assessment transfer task. And there are lots of resources. You can see through the level as a transfer skills. There are a lot of resources. I put mine as well for Italian resources, but there are in all the languages.
Very nice.
All right. I think we're going to respect our hour. I would really like to thank, on behalf of NYSAWLA, I would really like to thank Diana Garone for offering her expertise and her time today and sharing so many really cool ideas and great ideas with us. I thank you. And I thank all of you for attending. I look forward to seeing you at our next workshop, which is after break. So everyone, and if you're getting, I don't know if the college kids are getting next week off, but the rest of us, I hope you enjoy your break and do something to recharge a little bit for yourselves. So I thank you all for attending, and I hope that you had a good hour, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.